Hello there, you're watching All 24 News, World News program with me, Karim Fazakri, and up next are the top stories. The Israeli occupation keeps violating the ceasefire, hitting Gaza with violent raids. Human Rights Watch confirms war crimes in the West Bank. Meanwhile, martyrs fall in Beirut, and Lebanon is calling for international action to stop the attacks. Also in our news, in Europe, the parliament just rejected Morocco's new trade deal as the Polisario Front calls its participation in the African-European Summit a diplomatic win. Next up, at the summit in Luanda, Algeria's foreign minister joins talks on boosting integration through effective multilateralism. Across the continent, South Africa's president hails the G20 summit in Johannesburg as a major success, charting a bold and collective course for the future. And later on in Europe, Washington and Kiev are back at the table negotiating peace in Ukraine. Kiev unveils a draft reflecting its priorities, while the EU insists its role must be central in any plan. The details are right up. Welcome back, it's great to have you with us tonight. First off in our news, the Israeli occupation kept up its attack in Gaza on Sunday, the 45th day since the ceasefire started. Warplanes hit Khan Yunis, gunboats fired off Rafah, and residential areas in Gaza City and Beit Lahia were bombed. A child was killed and many were injured. Meanwhile, the Gaza government media office says 24 people died and 87 were wounded in just 24 hours. Since the ceasefire began, nearly 500 violations have been recorded, leaving over 340 dead, mostly women and children, and hundreds more injured. Officials warned these repeated attacks are undermining the ceasefire and keeping Gaza on edge. In reactions, Hamas has once again slammed the Zionist moves in Gaza, saying the occupation is trying to change the reality on the ground and break the ceasefire. They say hundreds have died, withdrawal lines are being shifted, and the violations keep coming under flimsy excuses. The group is calling on mediators to step in and pressure the entities to stop. Meanwhile, Hamas leadership met with Egyptian officials in Cairo to discuss the second phase of the ceasefire.
The systematic Zionist violations of the agreement have resulted in the martyrdom of hundreds of people due to ongoing airstrikes and killings carried out under fabricated pretexts. These violations have also caused changes in the withdrawal lines of the occupation army, in contradiction with the maps that were mutually agreed upon. We reaffirm our rejection of all attempts by the government of war criminal Netanyahu to impose a new reality that contradicts what was agreed. We call on mediators to intervene urgently and exert pressure to immediately stop these violations. The escalation of Zionist occupation breaches in the Gaza Strip places both the mediators and the U.S. administration before their responsibility to confront these attempts aimed at undermining the ceasefire in Gaza.
On the same context, Gaza authorities are raising the alarm as the occupation is still blocking heavy equipment from entering the Strip, making it harder to recover the bodies of martyrs. Local civil defense and the government media office say this is another violation of the ceasefire, coming despite promises from international organizations to let in cranes and other gear to clear the rubble up and finish the recovery work. For its part, the Human Rights Watch is sounding the alarm on the West Bank. According to their latest report, the occupation committed war crimes during its ground offensive earlier this year. The organization says tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians were blocked from returning home. Hundreds of houses were demolished, and around 32,000 people were forcibly displaced from 3 refugee camps. Still in the West Bank, tensions remain high. Dozens of Palestinians were injured on Sunday in settler attacks and raids by occupation forces. In Qalqaliyah, 2 people were hit by live fire. while another was wounded near the separation wall in Aram, just north of Al-Quds. Similarly, settler attacks backed by occupation forces also left several injured in Jabba and 6 more in Beit Ur. On top of that, Zionist forces carried out mass arrests across the region, raiding homes, vandalizing property, and detaining 9 people, including a child and a former prisoner in Al-Khalil, with others arrested in Bethlehem, Nablus, and Ariha. Even though a ceasefire has technically been in place for a month and a half in Gaza, for Palestinians, the reality feels nothing like a truce. Here's Yassine Rikti with more.
Despite a ceasefire technically being in place, Zionist forces kept up heavy attacks across Gaza on Sunday. That's the 45th day of strikes since the agreement was supposed to take effect. Local reports say airstrikes hit several areas, including Khan Yunis and parts of Gaza City, while gunboats opened fire off Rafah's coast. A child was killed and others wounded. Residential buildings in Zaytun, Tufa, Beit Lahia all hit again, along with artillery shelling near the Bureij refugee camp in the middle of the strip. In Deir al-Balah, we see families gathering around the bodies of loved ones killed in Saturday's strikes. Ahmed Abu Shawish, who lost several relatives, said they thought they were safe under the truce, and then out of nowhere, 2 rockets hit homes belonging to his family.
We were feeling safe, but there is a truce. As they say, this is a belt of my martyr cousin. They say there is a truce. Suddenly in a second, we heard 2 rockets. We went running to the houses and found that 2 houses of our family and the family of Abu Shawish are damaged, and who was inside? Women and children.
He goes on to say people were just trying to get their lives back on track after weeks of non-stop trauma, and now they're right back to loss, destruction, and unanswered questions.
What's the reason? Nobody knows. Aren't we supposed to be in truce? We are looking at the house. We've been trying to forget this scene for a month. We are starting to go back to our normal life. How we are supposed to go back? We are back to martyrs, back to destruction, back to injuries. What's the reason? We are confused. No one knows.
Crowds then gathered for funeral prayers before carrying the bodies for burial, scenes that have become heartbreakingly routine. Meanwhile, in Nusayrat, families were sifting through the rubble of homes destroyed in another airstrikes the night before.
God is sufficient for me, and He is the best disposer of affairs. We are not waiting for any intervention, neither from Arabs nor from Muslims. We are being killed for 2 years now, and no one moved. Will they move for 10, 20 or 50 people killed?
Another resident, Kamal Abu Shawish, says he simply doesn't believe in the truce at all.
We don't believe there is anything called truce. Ceasefire will happen when they completely withdraw. But saying yellow, red or green, this is all empty talk.
Once again, these scenes, shattered homes, families grieving, people searching through debris, all highlight the same reality. On paper, there is a ceasefire, but on the ground, the violence hasn't stopped. Officials are also warning that the occupation is still refusing to let heavy machinery into Gaza, which means even recovering bodies trapped under the rubble is nearly impossible.
And on a related note, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made it clear on Sunday that lasting global peace can't happen without a free Palestinian state along the 1967 borders with East Al-Quds as its capital. Speaking at the end of the G20 summit in Johannesburg, Erdogan also praised South Africa for its long-standing and wavering support for the Palestinian cause.
After the ceasefire, it is crucial to implement a 2-state solution. Without a state of Palestine based on the 1967 borders, and with East Jerusalem as capital, true global peace cannot be achieved. We will adhere to this principled stance for our Gazan brothers and sisters.
In Lebanon, tensions escalated after occupation airstrikes hit Beirut and southern towns, leaving at least 5 dead and 25 injured. Officials said a missile strike hit an apartment building in Harat Reik, damaging nearby cars and buildings. Another strike killed a driver in Vintage Vale, while drones targeted towns like Aita Shab, Ad-Dayaise, and Hermel.
Today we were just sitting and suddenly there was a very loud sound. My house is on the second street. I came to check because my aunts live here on this street and my sister also lives here on the first floor. I've been calling but she's not answering yet. There are those women who have lost a martyr, a husband, a child.
Meanwhile, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun urged the international community to step in and put a stop to the Zionist attacks. He warned that without intervention, the aggression could spark further regional tensions, noting that the NAT has ignored repeated calls to halt its strikes. In another story, in Brussels, the European Parliament's Agriculture Committee slammed the New Deal with Morocco over products from the occupied Sahrawi territories. Lawmakers accused the European Commission of bending to Morocco's pressure and trying to sidestep the European Court of Justice, which ruled that including Sahrawi lands in such agreements is illegal. They also called the attempt to relabel the territory a disgrace to international law.
The European Commission held an extraordinary discussion concerning the origin of fruit and vegetables from the occupied Western Sahara in order to keep imports of Sahrawi agricultural products under Moroccan cover. And I'm astonished by the Commission's audacity and the manner in which it is ignoring the rulings of European Court of Justice on free trade agreements.
This agreement is illegal and immoral. We are fully aware of what's happening. You want to buy time, despite a court ruling condemning the agreement. But we are here to put an end to your maneuvers and to continue our categorical rejection of this project.
This agreement is not in accordance with the international law. We Europeans are the ones who often defend respect for international law, and we must take ourselves seriously and act accordingly when it comes to agricultural products from Western Sahara.
And at the African-European Summit in Luanda, the Sahrawi Republic's ambassador to Angola and Namibia, Hamdi Khalil Mayara, called his country's participation a clear diplomatic win. Speaking to our channel, he said it's a strong pushback against Morocco's propaganda and an affirmation of the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination, as recognized by UN Resolution 2797. He added that recent Moroccan media attacks on the African Union came right after the Sahrawi president joined this major international summit.
This presence carries significant importance, especially after the misleading campaign carried out by the Moroccan occupier following the issuance of the latest Security Council resolution, as if everything had come to an end. The policy of the closed file has been pursued by Morocco for many years, since the beginning of the Western Sahara question. The presence of the Western Sahara at a high level is a practical response to Morocco's misleading campaign that claims the issue has been settled. The presence of the president is an embodiment of the fact that the Sahrawi Republic is a fully fledged member of the African Union.
Representing President Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has arrived in Luanda, Angola for the 7th Africa-Europe Summit. Over the next 2 days, leaders will dive into key issues: peace, security, development, migration, and governance, while taking stock of the partnership between Africa and Europe. So it seems all is set for the Africa-Europe Summit in Luanda. Officials met Sunday to wrap up final documents ahead of Monday's kickoff, with big talks on cooperation, security, governance, and migration. Here's Zahra Farjani with the details.
Africa and Europe are once again coming together as the two continents prepare for their 7th Joint Political Summit on November 24th and 25th in Luanda, the Angolan capital. This year's summit places a strong emphasis on promoting peace and prosperity and on strengthening the strategic partnership that links both continents. The meeting takes place against the backdrop of major global shifts, which have brought several urgent issues to the forefront of the leaders' agenda. Discussions will center on 4 main themes: multilateralism, prosperity, peace and security, and governance, alongside the key topics of mobility and migration. The summit will bring together prominent leaders and heads of states from both Africa and Europe, with high-level representation from regional organizations. Experts say this joint gathering marks an important moment to rethink the cooperation framework between the two continents, reaffirming that sustainable development, political stability and economic integration remain top priorities moving forward. This edition is also expected to give leaders the chance to review the progress made since the last summit in 2022, particularly regarding the commitments outlined in the AU-EU Joint Vision for 2030. That vision is reinforced by growing cooperation grounded in multilateral action, seen as a practical way to deepen coordination between the African Union and the European Union within major international institutions, especially the G20. After 25 years of partnership, observers believe this summit represents another step towards strengthening strategic ties across vital sectors, and an important opportunity to support development across the African continent.
The G20 summit wrapped up in Johannesburg, making the first time Africa has hosted the bloc's top leaders. After 2 days of talks on key global political and economic issues, leaders adopted their outcome document. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called it a success, praising the summit's bold and collective approach toward inclusive growth.
The summit has taken place at a crucial time as calls around the world grow louder for progress on the imperatives of our time: to end poverty in all its forms and ramifications, to reduce inequality within and amongst countries, and to take urgent action to combat climate change. This year, we have recognized the growing debt burden that is faced by many developing economy countries as a major obstacle to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. The G20 has pledged to extend support to low and middle income countries as they confront debt vulnerabilities. Together, we must create a virtuous cycle of reduced debt, higher public investment, and more rapid and inclusive economic growth.
On the same occasion, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says hosting the G20 summit on African soil for the first time was a big moment for the continent. He stressed that Africa's priorities and those of the global south were front and center on the G20 agenda, making sure the continent's development needs got the attention they deserve.
And we've met in the face of significant challenges and demonstrated our ability to come together, even in the times of great difficulty, to pursue a better world. South Africa's presidency marks the first time, as we have said, that the G20 has been hosted and held on African soil.
In other news, Algeria has been elected vice president for the North African region in the Bureau of the Executive Committee of the African Parliamentary Union. The election took place during the 47th session of the Assembly of Speakers in Kinshasa, Congo. Officials say this is a clear nod to Algeria's ongoing role in boosting African parliamentary cooperation and defending shared regional causes. Algeria is ready to team up with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO, to tackle shared challenges and build a stronger industrial future. Algerian Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mines Mohamed Arqab made the remarks at the opening of UNIDO's 21st General Conference in Riyadh. He highlighted the need to boost UNIDO's role in sustainable development, especially in the face of global challenges like geopolitical tensions, climate change, and the widening technology gap.
بدورنا نؤكد لكم استعدادنا للعمل معكم.
We in return assure you of our readiness to work constructively with you to continue strengthening the role of the UNIDO and to coordinate with all member states in addressing common challenges and building a more prosperous and sustainable industrial future for all.
Moving on to another topical development, Kiev and its Western allies are moving fast on talks to end the war in Ukraine. From Geneva, Ukraine unveiled a new draft of Trump's peace plan, aiming to cover its key priorities. Meanwhile, the EU made it clear it wants a strong role, with Ursula von der Leyen stressing that any deal must stop the fighting, prevent future conflicts and respect Ukraine's right to decide its own path. Here's Salman Hasib now.
A new round of back and forth between Washington and Kyiv after President Trump fired off a long post on Truth Social. He basically accused Ukraine's leadership of showing zero gratitude for American support in the war with Russia and took another swipe at Europe, saying EU countries keep buying Russian oil while the US keeps shipping what he called massive amounts of weapons through NATO. Well, Kyiv didn't let that slide. President Zelensky jumped onto X with a detailed reply saying,
There was a ceasefire under international auspices, led primarily by the United States of America. Since then, and since the announcement of the agreement and the halt of military operations, the Israeli enemy has remained persistent and addicted to continuing its aggression, targeting buildings, people and civilians, and you know that this area is par excellence a civilian area.
And all of this online sparring is happening while US and Ukrainian negotiators are literally sitting down in Geneva. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Ukraine's Andriy Yermak say they've made solid progress on a draft American peace plan. Rubio even called it their best meeting so far.
We have a very good work product that was already built on a foundation of input from all the relative parties involved here, and we were able to go through some of those items now, point by point, and I think we've made good progress.
Europe, meanwhile, is making its red lines very clear. Ursula von der Leyen says Ukraine's borders can be touched, its army can't be weakened, and the EU has to be right at the center of any peace framework.
We have agreed on the main elements necessary for just and lasting peace and Ukraine's sovereignty. And let me highlight three of them. First, borders cannot be changed by force. Second, as a sovereign nation, there cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave the country vulnerable to future attack and thereby also undermining European security. Third, the centrality of the European Union in securing peace for Ukraine must be fully reflected.
Spain's Pedro Sanchez is also chiming in, saying the US plan needs a serious review so Europeans and Ukrainians feel properly represented.
While respecting and acknowledging the effort made by the US administration, I believe that this plan, this peace proposal, needs to be thoroughly reviewed so that Europeans and Ukrainians can feel represented and can build the just and lasting peace that Ukrainians logically deserve and need. And of course, Europe needs to.
And as all these statements fly around, convoys keep rolling into the US mission in Geneva, where negotiators are hoping to narrow the gaps and maybe move a little closer to a peace outline everyone can live with.
Violence in Sudan's Kordofan region has forced nearly 40,000 people to flee their homes. The UN's humanitarian office, OCHA, says this wave of displacement happened between October 26th and November 19th, highlighting the ongoing instability and urgent need for assistance. And elsewhere in the Middle East, Iran is standing firm on its nuclear rights. The foreign ministry says Tehran won't give up uranium enrichment, even if it's pausing for now. Officials stress the program is for peaceful purposes under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and that talks with Russia are ongoing. They also accuse the IAEA of bowing to US and European pressure.
Iran says it has full independence to cooperate with other countries on peaceful nuclear energy and will not give up its internationally recognized right to enrich uranium. Talks with Russia on expanding peaceful nuclear cooperation continue seriously. Iran also announced that its September agreement with the IAEA is no longer valid due to actions by the European Troika and the United States.
Back to Africa, in Nigeria, insecurity is hitting schools harder than ever. Last Friday, over 300 children and staff were abducted, highlighting a worrying trend in the north, where armed groups have been targeting schools for years. Here's Karim Masfawi now.
Nigeria is in shock after the abduction of more than 300 children and staff from a Catholic school in Niger State in one of the worst mass kidnappings in the country's history. The attack, which occurred last Friday, has sent waves of fear across the nation.
I don't think anybody feels safe. Aside me, I don't think anybody feels safe for what is happening in Nigeria presently, because the kidnapping, the bandits everywhere, the killing, everybody is so scared.
Meanwhile, public anger is rising, with citizens questioning how such a large-scale assault could happen again. The incident has reignited intense debate over Nigeria's worsening insecurity crisis.
The government should try by all means to adopt a system whereby there will be security agencies that will be released to churches, schools, and other infrastructures that at least the people can be safe.
Let them mobilize security agents, all the consigns. Let them make sure that insecurity is stopped in Nigeria.
Authorities in Niger State have ordered the immediate closure of all schools and the evacuation of boarding students amid rising threat, while the security forces have launched an extensive search operation. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for the attack.
And finally, it's time to catch up on other news, making headlines in the News in Brief, this time with Sofian Kinturi.
Venezuela again condemned U.S. deployment of forces in the Caribbean, calling it a continuation of Washington's policy of force. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez said U.S. seeks to maintain its dominance. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi condemned Japan's recent statements on Taiwan, calling them a shocking and public mistake. In a statement, he accused Tokyo of crossing a red line and sending a dangerous signal by openly hinting at possible military involvement in Taiwan. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that Ottawa will delay resuming talks concerning trade with the United States until the right moment. Speaking to reporters on the sideline of G20 summit in Johannesburg, Carney said Canada is currently focused on domestic priorities and building new partnerships, adding that he has no urgent issues to raise with President Donald Trump at this time. Vietnam's floods have left 90 dead and 12 missing, authorities said Sunday, after days of non-stop rain and landslides. Tourist areas and entire neighborhoods, especially Nam Tran and around Dalat, were heavily flooded or hit by deadly mudslides.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the end of our news for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Karim Zachary signing off. Thank you for watching and do take care.